Welcome to a brand new episode of the All Hoops Podcast, your go-to home for all things basketball. I'm your host, Steve Inman, and I'm joined, as always, by the great producer to the stars with the silky voice. It's Chris Brito. Chris, my friend, how are you?
Hey, buddy. Happy to be on another episode of the All Hoops Podcast, and we're excited to bring in John, one of our former classmates and good buddy. John is also a podcaster like us. He actually has a really cool podcast where he also talks about sports. And today we're going to actually talk about our favorite thing to talk about, which is basketball. So first off, John, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Haven't seen you guys in a while. I think podcaster is very generous. I have not been consistent at all. Like, it's been more of a once a month thing, and I need to really get better at that. So you guys need to keep me accountable.
Yeah, of course. We're always happy to jump on yours. You could always jump on ours, and we could always collaborate on certain things.
Yeah, man.
We're always fans of the John Talks podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about the NBA salary cap. Apparently, it's going to jump in a big way, according to various reports. There's the Ben Simmons news that he is not going to suit up for the Philadelphia 76ers. And so let's get right into it, guys. We start with the NBA salary cap via Forbes. According to a league source, projections indicate that a $171 million salary cap is possible by 2025, assuming no cap smoothing. Remember, cap smoothing is when you have, it goes up $10 million a year for 5-10 years. The players said absolutely not last time this happened, about 5-6 years ago. I expect a similar situation where they're not going to want this again. They want chaos. They want as many teams acting like drunken sailors as possible, because last time we saw Kevin Durant be able to join a team with already 3 max slots in the Golden State Warriors, and we saw teams just throwing money away at guys like Timothy Mozgov, $64 million. You had Evan Turner, $70 million. Chris, your boy, Joakim Noah, $72 million. So, Chris, let's start with you. What are the ramifications of this if this is true, where if we go from $110, $115 million salary cap all the way to 171 in a couple of years?
Well, I think the first thing that we're going to see is obviously a big spending frenzy in a few years, right? And I think it'll benefit a team like the Knicks, who are currently on are projected to improve the next few years, and we're going to have a bunch of young players that we're going to have to pay a lot of money. So I think that'll be something that we have to keep an eye out for. But I think on a bigger level, throughout the NBA, we're going to see guys that don't necessarily, are those max type guys getting paid much more money than they are right now. So that'll be one of the more interesting things to keep an eye out for. As you were talking about with Mozgov and whatnot, what is the deal? Someone like Evan Fournier is going to get in a few years if he keeps playing well. What, $100 million max? I don't know. I don't know if I want to live in that world, guys.
John, what do you think?
I think if you are Evan Fournier or on the level of Mozgov, Turner, Biyombo, you're very happy about this, because you can be a mediocre player averaging about 10 points a game and getting $10-15 million a year. I mean, $10-15 million to anybody is still a nice chunk of change. I am curious to see what the owners do, what the governors do, because it's one thing, yes, James Harden, you're going to throw max money at him, those types of players, Kyrie Irving, I understand that, and you'll still see super teams. I think we're going to see super teams regardless. The thing that I'm interested to see is, are they going to start to squeeze out the mid-tier guys, and start to penny pinch? Now, I know that they have to have a salary cap that they have, I know there's a floor. I know there's a minimum that they do have to spend in there. But, with analytics being more prevalent, I am interested to see how these contracts now roll out. So, for instance, if a player nowadays is making, let's say, $7 million, does that mean in 2025, okay, they're going to make $10 to $12 million? That might be the way that you go. In terms of super teams,
I think they would. But go ahead.
Right, yeah. And I think just in terms of super teams always find a way. They always find a way to get their stars in there. There's mid-level exceptions. I don't know if bird rights are still a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you can get a player, You could get players on buyouts too, like a Blake Griffin, who's still serviceable. It's amazing to me what some of these owners could do. So I think it's great for the sport because the NBA offseason sometimes is more interesting than the regular season and postseason. I know I'm saying this on a basketball podcast. It might sound
Oh, you're
treasonous,
correct. You're 100%
but
correct. We say it all the time.
right, yeah. And like that's what I watch for. Now that you're going to see more teams in the mix to do it, it'll be interesting. But I think at the end of the day, it still comes down to the organizations itself. The Minnesota Timberwolves could have $200 million in cap space. I don't think anybody's going up to Minneapolis to play. So, and that's not a knock on them. It's just that's what it comes down to. They have certain organizations, these players that they want to play for, and locations that they want to go to, and it'll certainly help those teams out.
And I think you made a good point there. And hear me out for a second with the New York Knicks, right? They come off a season where they're very relevant. They finish as a 4 seed. I don't know if they could do that again, but I think they can win a similar number of games, 45 win pace, right? If they do that for the next couple of years, is it possible when this cap jumps, right? And they have money to say, hey, we can keep the team we have now, this young, fun team who are now all in their primes. And we can go out and get a Zion Williamson or a John Morant or a Cade Cunningham or whatever young players are about to become free agents. And those guys can say, you know what? We can go team up together and we can go to New York where they've been pretty relevant for the last couple of years. This is not a team we have to go lift up from the bottom. We just have to get them from the middle to the championship. So I think the Knicks could be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this if they don't implode, which is a major if with this franchise.
Well, hold on. This has been the narrative for the Knicks for the last 20 years. I'm sorry, Chris. This has been the narrative for the Knicks for the last 20 years. Has been, we'll just wait a few summers until these players become available, and nothing has changed. I might be one of the few Jim Dolan defenders out there, but like this guy always wants to spend money, and these players still don't come over. So
and he'll have the chance.
Right.
Yeah, but the difference now being that there's actually this idea of culture and an idea of stability that we have not had in a really long time. And I think that's been the biggest difference. And I think if you're a free agent, now you look at the situation with the Knicks and be like, you know what, now for the first time in a very long time, they have things under, there's some stability there. And I think that'll be the reason. That's why people like Kemba Walker, who I think in years past would not have chosen the Knicks, came here. And even someone like Evan Fournier, who obviously is not a star, but he's a guy who could have gone to a much better team in terms of, a better route, an easier route to a championship than us. So the one point that I wanted to bring up about the Knicks, though, was, I wonder how it's, eventually things will smooth over, things will normalize in terms of the salary cap jump, right? But really that key year will be 2025. Right. And I think, many of the rookies now, like the LaMelo Balls of the world, right? Like what will they do? Will they, choose to will they choose to wait out and get that big money jump, or they want to secure the bag earlier than usual? My guess is probably the former rather than the latter, but it just sets up for a fascinating landscape. And I think we're going to see a lot of young players jump, and who knows, the Knicks could be a destination, even though now I don't think we necessarily need to aim for that. It's just like something to keep an eye out for in a few years from now.
Chris, I think that's a great point, and I think it really depends on that CBA, right? Like if they decide, hey, the salary cap's going up this much, what does that rookie scale extension look like? Basically right now you have the 4 years $100 million is the standard, right? 4 years 130 for those top guys. But if all of a sudden in 2025 does that look like is 5 years 200 the standard now? So I think it depends on what that looks like, but it'll be really fascinating to see how this all plays out because everyone's going to get paid. The NBA is in great hands right now. And obviously the reason why we're talking about the cap going up is because basketball-related income is at an all-time high. People are watching more games than ever. People are buying more jerseys and merchandise than ever. And the TV deals are only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, this is a good problem to have. I'm not thinking, oh, my God, poor owners are going to have to pay Evan Fournier $100 million because, frankly, if they're doing that, they're doing pretty well themselves. But let's move on, guys. Ben Simmons in the news once again, according to Woj. he will not report for the opening of training camps next week and intends to never play another game for the franchise. Simmons hasn't spoke to team officials since late August when he had a meeting with Sixers officials, including most likely the owner of the team. And guys, how do you see this playing out?
Okay, so I think that has been easily the biggest off-season story aside from, the U.S. Olympics almost losing 2 games, and that's about it. I think the Ben Simmons situation, you just have to trade him. I mean, he's not going to go somewhere where he wants to go. He'll go to the 4th California team, not one of the 3 ones that he wanted. And quite frankly, the best place that he can go is somewhere like the Kings. I mean, granted, it's a place where there's been a lot of dysfunction, much like the Knicks in years past, but it's a place where Ben Simmons could rehabilitate his image. And I think that's the biggest issue with Ben Simmons, right? He is obviously a very talented player, but I think living under the shadow of Joel Embiid, it's hard to really use the skill set that you have and really make it your own team, right? Because you're always the number 2 if Joel Embiid is on that team. And clearly a team that focuses with their star center and their point guard who can't shoot, the spacing will never work. We've talked about this for years. The spacing is just not going to work. And it's not a coincidence that when Embiid went down or has gone down with injuries, Ben Simmons starts to play much better because he has more space to operate. So a team like the Kings makes a whole lot of sense. The Sixers obviously need more shooting. And then maybe if they can prize someone like Halliburton, I think that'll be as good as a get as you can get right now in the NBA for him, for Ben Simmons trade.
Jeez, Chris, you're reading like Rich Paul, like the press release that, Rich Paul is putting out there. I mean, if I'm the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm ecstatic right now. Go ahead, take a walk. I mean, this guy stinks. He's probably the most overrated player in the NBA right now. Talent. What talent do you see? He'd get to the hole. That's it. He's not some elite defender. When the season came down to it, he didn't want to take a shot, and he hasn't developed a jump shot at all. And it's not even something where you could say, oh, he's not hitting his threes, but he's certainly good for his mid-range jumpers or within 15 feet. No, that's not the case. He's done nothing. And, Steve, I know that you touched upon this and you could expand upon this. He's got 4 years left on his deal, guys. I get player empowerment and get the money that you can. Well, he got 4 years, $147 million remaining on there. So if I'm the Sixers, listen, you get what you can get for him. If you're another team, maybe you can try and fix him. But the only way that Ben Simmons stays in the NBA at this current level, and I say that with quotes, is if he's able to develop a jump shot and help a team, because he's not helping the Sixers, who did a good job to build a team around him, and they still couldn't win. So I blame it more on Simmons than the Sixers.
Yeah, I do. I think they did because they surrounded him with shooters.
Right, I mean, they surrounded him with shooters.
Who, besides Curry this year, who's your other best shooter on the team?
I'm just saying, look
I
over
like
the years,
Korkmaz.
Chris.
They've had Redick. Tobias Harris can shoot. They brought in Jimmy Butler for a while, who they kind of thought would give Simmons that alpha dog mentality. It went the opposite way. Obviously, now Jimmy Butler is on his, next team in Miami. But look, if Ben Simmons was a free agent today, would he get 4 years and $147 million? I think the talent says yes, they would. But it's that's a close call to me. And the fact that you're not only saying, hey, you're taking this giant deal, but you got to give us draft picks and young players and something that can help us win right now, it doesn't make sense. I don't see why they think they can get 110 cents on the dollar for a guy who's basically begging to leave. So at this point, I think their best bet is, as you said, go to Sacramento, try to do Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley and maybe a pick or something like that, and then use that pick to go get something else in a 3-team deal. But I just don't see it. And if Ben Simmons is going to hold out, what stops everybody else from holding out who doesn't like their situation? Because if you said, where does he rank among NBA players? I'd put him right now in the 40s or 50s. So there's so many better players right now. And for him to be doing this, it just shows how the player empowerment era has kind of gone out of whack. Because a guy like LeBron, or as you said, John, Kyrie Irving or James Harden, those guys should be able to force their way to wherever they want to go. But when Ben Simmons is doing it, what's stopping anybody from doing this?
Well, and this is where you need the GMs to step up. And, we see this in baseball all the time. You shouldn't collude, but there should be some solidarity there where it's like one team is not going to spend like a drunken sailor. You know, if no teams are offering Ben Simmons a contract, then that's what it should be. And no team should offer him at those demands. But, you know, there's always one team. I mean, one out of what,
Never gonna happen.
30 teams. Right. It's never going to happen.
And his upside is worth the money, but he's not worth the money plus the picks and the players. And, you know, we talked before the show, Chris, and you talk about De'Aaron Fox. I would not let De'Aaron Fox go for Ben Simmons. I think that's a huge downgrade. And, you know, it's about where their value is right now. But, you know, we're running late here. Obviously, do you guys see Ben Simmons, you know, getting traded before the season starts?
Yes.
Yeah, I
John?
think so too. If not, then I guess it's after. Do they still have that? What's it, after December 15th or something like that? There's a.
Yeah, so you can make trades, but you can't trade guys who signed this summer. So it makes it harder to do a trade.
Yeah. No,
Well,
he's
My
awesome.
guess is I think this is going to drag into the season because if anybody's going to get uncomfortable here, it's going to be Daryl Morey, who's done this before, and I don't think he's willing to sell Ben Simmons for 50 cents on the dollar.
And let's be honest here. Like he can get fined. And listen, you only have so much time of your prime as an athlete to play. So like it doesn't bode well for anybody, especially Ben Simmons, to wait. So I think it's just better for everyone to like move on. Like let's keep it moving, you know?
All right, guys, let's get to our final thoughts.
All right.
Oh.
So go ahead, Stevie.
All right, guys, final thoughts time here. John, you really wanted to be on this show for the sole reason of talking about your boy, JJ Redick. And JJ obviously retired from the NBA today. 15 seasons, 14 of which he made the playoffs. Tell us what your favorite moments from JJ Redick's career were, John.
A lot of them have to do when he was at Duke. He really got me into basketball, and just seeing Duke on TV every weekend was an event for me because he would just – his range was inside the gym. He could just knock down any three-pointer. I remember the game against Texas, report 41, had 35 in the Dean Dome, which was a pretty cool game. I'm trying to think some other college moments, winning the ACC tournament against Jared Dudley and Boston College. But this guy was as good as done his second year in the NBA. And he worked hard to move without the ball, worked on his defense, and became a really good rotational player. Listen, he's a first ballot college basketball Hall of Famer, and he's a Duke Mount Rushmore guy. And if he's not, he's definitely a top 5 Dookie of all time. So that's no knock on him. The knocks on him are he didn't get to a Final Four and succeed as well as he should have, and he never won that national championship for a blue blood. But definitely my favorite player. When I was 18. I got my license, and the Magic were playing at the Prudential Center, and I held up a sign that said, JJ, I've been a fan since I was 13. Can I have your autograph? And he signed my jersey, and I ended up getting a picture with him at the end of the game afterwards when the Magic were going on the bus. And, yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of good memories. And, yeah, congratulations. But I do think we'll see him on a team this year if the Knicks or Nets need shooting.
John, thank you so much for joining us here on the All Hoops podcast. Tell people where they can find you real quick.
Yeah, anywhere you can catch podcast, Anchor, Apple, and Spotify. John Talks, JON Talks.
That's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. Chris, best as always, thank you so much. And we're going to be back next week to talk some over-unders here on the All Hoops podcast.
Bye, everyone.